Hello and welcome to this week's review on Dragon Ball Daima. This week I'm reviewing the episode Daima. Yes, that's the title. We kick off this review, as we always do with these reviews, by talking about the positives, and we start with the headline positives. I have to say that I found the use of sound and music in this episode to just be truly wonderful for reasons that I'm really going to love talking to in a few moments' time. I liked the way that it was teasing out lore and world building in a measured and well-paced way, and I thought that the action sequences we got in this episode were wonderfully animated and really warmed the cockles of my heart, which is something I never thought I'd end up saying about an action sequence. So we'll just say that, well, after last week's episode where pretty much everyone just sat around and waited for their tea, this week we get an episode which is full of things happening. And whilst I'm sure that this episode might not be quite what a certain selection of the fan base actually wants, I will be honest, by gum, I absolutely loved it. It really does feel like we are back on track, and I hope that things can continue to progress more or less like this as the season goes on. I know that it can't always be like this for various different reasons, but this episode, just in the here and now, was absolutely just brilliant. I loved every moment of it. It really does feel like the show is evoking the look and feel of classic Dragon Ball without leaning too hard into it too soon, because, you know, let's address the elephant in the room here. Classic Dragon Ball isn't for everyone, and going a little bit too hard into that wackiness and zaniness could annoy some people, and I'm sure that a couple of jokes in this week's episode might have fallen flat with some people. Hey, I think that he did all that stuff well, but with all that said, let us actually move on, and I just have to say is that this really does work well for me. And to be fair though, this series isn't trying to be Dragon Ball, it's trying to be Dragon Ball Daima. It is a tribute to Dragon Ball as a series, not just the part known as Dragon Ball. But anyway, we're getting rather distracted now, so let's get back into the meat of the review, and I will just say that before we get into the stuff that, let's be honest, a certain portion of you is going to be a lot more interested in, like aka the lore, I think it's still worth praising the sound design in this episode, as it feels like there is this genuine level of craft that has gone into just all of it. There is a richness to the soundscapes of some of our locations that gives a brilliant sense of place. I think that the sequences we get with them in space, in their little space plane, and then as they in the little holding hub area, I just really liked. It appealed to me in a way which is really hard to describe, and to be honest, that's one of the things that does bend my head a little bit talking about Dragon Ball Daima, is that so much of it works almost just off the weight of vibes, which doesn't make for a great review, but it certainly does make for a great time watching it. But I will say is that the sound work in this episode is really fantastic. Like I say, it works to create a great sense of place, and it ends up making the places that our characters find themselves in feel a lot more tangible, have a sense of reality to them, even if there are elements within that world design where it looks otherworldly and uncanny. Sure, it would be incredibly easy just to stick some stock sound effects in and leave it at that, and they may well be using stock sound effects, but the way in which they're using them feels layered in such a way that it makes it feel like a real actual location, almost as though, as absurd as it feels to say it, that they actually could just go out with a microphone and just stand by the side of it for about 20 minutes or so, get all the audio that they need, and now it just sounds like a real thing in this cartoon, or this anime series I should say. One of the true qualities of any kind of sound design, particularly with a series like this, is the part where you can just close your eyes and just listen to the soundtrack, just listen to just the audio of what you should be watching, and just by the strength of the sound design, the music, the sound effects, you get a clear understanding of where everyone is, what is going on at any given moment. And that is a major boon to this series, to make it feel as though where they are really putting a hell of a lot of effort into this. This is not just a, oh hey, it's the 40th anniversary, let's do a little bit of fun. No, this is a genuine, real attempt to make something special and spectacular, and I loved it. Now, I will admit that being an old Radiohead kind of makes me a little bit more susceptible to good sound design, so it might not be for everyone, but I just absolutely loved it. And to move into what I think a lot more people are going to want to talk about, let's start talking about some of the little lore things we have in this episode. And In this one, we get it underlined, likely not for the first or last time, that the Supreme Kai is originally from the Demon Realm. So the speculation over the past couple of weeks or so has been proven to be correct. His siblings aren't the black sheep of the family, he is, because they're all working the demon realm and he's all being the little goody two-shoes that became a major deity. It's just that he's the odd one out, he's the one that became the good one as far as these things can end up being. I think that's a neat twist. I'm curious to how this will end up work with pre-existing lore, because I do know there's been a lot of speculation as to how some pre-existing stuff, particularly from the Daizenshu little guidebooks things, how that's going to be integrated or not, whether that stuff's going to be retconned or what have you. So we'll end up seeing where that ends up going, but from what I understand from the pre-existing stuff is that all the Kai are born from a magic tree. They're born from fruit that grows on it. The golden fruit becomes Supreme Kai and major deities. The standard fruit just become irregular Kai, and the corrupted, rotten fruit become, I think it's called Makaioshin, the basically demon characters like Supreme Kai and his siblings are. Or maybe, I mean, they might have been born from that fruit and he was born from one of the good ones, but he was born in the demon realm. I don't know how all that fits in now. Honestly, I don't have that much of a connection to it, so I can't really feel one way or the other about it, but I still think it's really neat that that's where this character comes from originally, and they ended up becoming like the character they are, in a similar kind of way in which, as we now know, Kame became became Kami on Earth, despite being originally a demon, or having demon heritage, as it's turned out that is the case. It is specified that Supreme Kai and that specific sub-race of demons comes from the second level of that realm, and that they were all moved on, or they've all moved on to other places. Why they all went, where they went, is stuff that I'm sure they will end up finding out. But one of the things I do like, beyond all the fact that this is just interesting stuff that helps build out this world in a way which I think, I'd hate to be critical, but I think has been a way that the Dragon Ball series is desperately needed for an uncomfortably long time. One of the things I do like is the fact is just the simple way in which these different elements are being parcelled out to us. There is this gradual series of teases and setting up for ideas that we'll be explored later on, rather than getting a major exposition dump and then just moving on with all that information just rattling in the back of our heads. It's all being gradually doled out to us in a way that is well paced, and I think is a way that is a lot more easy to digest, because there are all this series that as soon as it becomes clear, oh, the Supreme Kai is actually from the demon realm, there'll be this big explanation, there'll be this series of flashback sequences. Dragon Ball as a series has done this time and time again, but here we're not getting that. I'm sure it's stuff that will be explained as time goes by, especially because, let's be honest, we're only 3 episodes into this. We got another 17 or so left to go, so we're going to learn about all this stuff as we go forward, which I'm looking forward to. I just hope that they maintain this pace with it, and they don't just suddenly go crazy and just throw a bunch of lore at us in one particular episode. That can be forgiven in certain contexts, but we'll soon see where all that goes as we go forward with it. I will say that I really do like the look of the Demon Realm now that we're finally here. We can actually have a proper look at it. It has a charm to it that feels like classic Dragon Ball, and by extension Z and Super, particularly with the colour palette of some of the locations that we end up seeing, and with the design of some of the demons present. It has a mythical, otherworldly look to it, this place that our characters find themselves in. Whilst every element of it may not be original, namely, the floating islands and such, it still has a way which it feels that these are just aspects of it. These are just elements of it. This is just an actual extension of the landscape. The fact that these things exist is not lent on in such a way as to go, oh, look how original we're being, or, oh, look, this is a reference to that thing. You know that thing. There's nothing like that. They're just things that exist. Floating islands that give off this strange gas that makes the air heavier and hard to move through, which is a neat little gag, and it sets up for a few interesting little moments in the action sequences coming up later on. This third level has this dry, arid, sand dune, almost Tatooine look to it, particularly when we get to the settlement that Goku and the others find themselves in. This whole realm, it has this look of being impoverished, like it's in a state of decay, as though whatever value that there was to some degree or another has just been lost to it. Whether that is naturally or by some other force, some other magic, we'll soon end up seeing. Maybe it's connected to that portal that's been blocked off that we end up seeing earlier on in the episode. Maybe it's something else we'll soon end up seeing. We see this decay with the statue of Deborah, with him making that peace sign, which... that's an interesting symbol. That's an interesting way for him to stand like that. I mean, maybe this whole series will ultimately confirm that he was a better guy than we expected that he would end up being, or maybe simply by demon standards he was a great guy, or maybe that was just a pose done just to like play to the crowds, and really he's not that nice in the way that, you know, certain world leaders tend to end up doing so. But it does end up creating for this interesting image, particularly when you bear in mind that the characters we most associate with this series doing the peace sign thing is either Goku or Hercule. Which, you know, interesting way to put all of this. The fact that the statue is crumbling, despite the fact that he's only been dead a matter of months, feels strange, which does lead into this idea that there's something darker going on that we aren't really aware of, which we'll end up finding out as time goes by, because maybe that's just a simple just reflection of how much things have gone downhill since however long it's been since this third level was any good, or maybe there is something else going on here. Maybe the reason why Gohan isn't part of this series of events is because maybe the scientist demon lady woman has grabbed him to try and figure it out, using his brains and his smarts in such a way as to figure out a solution to all of this. I mean, if it turns out that Gohan can save the day here by being a scholar and not a warrior, that would be a hell of a twist. And to be honest, I might well do a video speculating as to where the hell Gohan is during all of this at some point in the not too distant future. Maybe this review gets a decent share of likes and what have you, I'll do that. Or maybe I'll just do it anyway, but we'll soon see with all that. We'll continue on with this review, though, and I must say that usually when it comes to doing reviews like this, I tend to talk about the action towards the start of an episode, because, to be honest with you, there's only so many ways that you can say, oh, it looked grand, it looked good, because when you're watching series like this, when you're watching animated series, I've found it to be very rare that you get an action sequence that doesn't look good in some way, shape or form. There might be elements of the presentation I don't like, there may be the use of CG or what have you, but you get the idea. Largely it's good for one reason or another. But, of course, this is the first time that we're getting full action sequences in this particular show, so now I have a good reason to talk about it, and I will be blunt, and a lot of people may accuse me for blowing smoke when I say this, but this is some of the best action that I have seen in this series in a very long time. And I'm talking about Dragon Ball as an entire entity. From original Dragon Ball to Z, to GT, to Super, to now. This is some of the best I have ever seen in this series in a very, very long time. The choreography within those action sequences, the creativity that's on offer here, just seeing how, just the bit where Goku's just whacking the guy around the head with the plates is just a fun little sequence. One of the reasons I really like original Dragon Ball, classic Dragon Ball, whatever you want to call it, is because of those fight sequences. Whilst they aren't spectacular, while they don't have a grand visual flair to them, they often have a weight and choreography to them that makes them feel tangible, that makes them feel real. I remember a year or two ago when I was re-watching Dragon Ball, and there's that moment where, during one of the tournament arcs, where Tien has got Goku up against the wall and just absolutely leathering into him, and just thinking of, oh wow, I never knew this could be so violent. And that's just normal stuff, and when you compare that to stuff that comes later on in Z, and later on we got people getting their arms and legs and stuff blown off, it seems tame in comparison. But given just the impact of all of that in that particular fight sequence back then, compared to what we've been having sadly more recently, it looks a hell of a lot better. And now we're getting back to that feeling where, yes, it isn't spectacular, yes, there isn't a wider variety of powers and superpowers and transformations being used, but it feels a lot more impressive. It looks a lot more impressive. There's a lot more going on here. It's not just a bunch of characters blipping around the horizon and swinging around, going for about 5 minutes before someone gets kicked in the gut or karate chopped in the back of the head. There is an impact to all of this stuff, and there is a flair to it and an energy to it, which is something that has been drastically missing from so much of this series. So it's becoming increasingly absent as Z went through up until now, but now we have it back, and it feels really great to see it. It has an energy and a humour and a creativity to it, which again this series has been desperately lacking for me. I think the one with the action sequence we could have got with the bandits towards the start of the episode, there's a part of me that's disappointed that we didn't actually get something there, because it felt like it was setting up for a more classic Dragon Ball just action bit, where with this you have the bandits and they're firing their arrows and throwing their spears at Goku and the others, but because the air is so heavy, none of the arrows have any impact, and they're just kind of helplessly and impotently just falling on the floor, and it's just this fun little visual image of, you got all these bandits, we're going to show them, fire the arrows, and that's it. And I wish there had been something there. Maybe we'll do something with them later on, but I wish there was a little bit something there. But that second fight just felt really awesome. Again, it had a fluidity, it had a flair to it. It's something that we saw teased in that first episode when we had the flashes back to the recreated Boo arc, and there's a part of me that just thinking then, like, you know, this is all great and good, but imagine if we had this level of choreography, this level of impact, this quality of animation for just some of the more spectacular fights that we've had in Dragon Ball Super. Like, imagine some of the stuff from the Tournament of Power animated like this. Even if it was just the final stuff between Goku and Jiren. I mean, yeah, sure, it's not going to be as wacky and as silly, but having just that fluidity and that sense of there actually being a real fight there without just superpowered nonsense, that would have been amazing. And maybe this is a direction they'll go on with the future of Dragon Ball. I hope it is, or at least something similar to it, because bloody hell, this series just looks and feels so amazing. With that said, however, it's time to get into the negatives, and I will admit that it may feel like nitpicking, and I will put my hands up and say that this is nitpicking. But the main negative that I have with this episode is the fact there is this brief moment where they end up reusing some animation. It's the moment where they're bouncing from dimension to dimension. The first time they do it and they're getting knocked about like it's a washing machine. Oh, fun, silly, good humour, good, really like it. And then they do that entire sequence again over a couple of minutes later, though shorter. I'm glad that it's shorter and they didn't just redo the gag, but at the same time it's just feeling of, you could have done something else, maybe. Again, given the quality of everything else, it's not that bad. It's not the worst thing in the world. If you am to get into something that's a little bit more of a real pointed criticism that I have for the episode, is the fact that whilst Glorio is setting up to be a potentially interesting character, whilst Supreme Kai is setting up to have some interesting stuff divulged about him and his personal history, I think the issue that we have at the moment is that both those characters are just a bit too serious and a bit too stoic. They don't really play off Goku in a way that is as appealing and as entertaining as I would like for a series like this. This may well change as the series goes on but I think that with these kind of adventure shows you need a wide variety of different personalities for the different characters to bounce off of. We got that in the classic run of Dragon Ball, we got that during the Namek arc in Z, we got that for what it was worth in GT, with their little adventure towards the start of it, and we got bits of that here and there within Super for the sparing moments we got, and it's a similar kind of thing that you'll get with Doctor Who, when you'll have different characters with backstories travelling together, but there isn't much of a feel of difference between the characters themselves, between Glorio and Supreme Kai, and there's a part of me that's wondering exactly how the other cast members will slide into it, when, whilst yes, Vegeta and Piccolo aren't the most stoic in quite the same extremeness that Glorio is, and Kibito isn't either, there is a part of me that's worried that you end up going to have a situation where you have a handful of characters which have largely the same personality. Granted, with Vegeta you can play around with that a lot more. With Piccolo, we'll see where that goes, but I'm still interested to see how they'll be integrated into it later. With all that said, let us get into the overview, and I will just say that, yeah, it definitely looks like the previous episode was just difficult second episode syndrome, because this week is a world better. We actually, beyond the simple fact that we actually were doing something this episode and not just having everyone sat around waiting to get a takeaway, this week we actually are getting back into the feel of the adventure. We're actually regaining that sense of just that spirit of adventure that I really enjoyed about that first episode. And this week's episode is the same length as the previous one. It did feel as though there was a lot more going on within it. And I really did like the fact that we got the little bumper thing midway through the episode, as though there was supposed to be an ad break there. Oh yeah, sure, when it's broadcast on television, that's roughly where the ad break will end up going, but still, it was a nice little thing. It added a little bit of flair to it, and I'm just really want to see where all this ends up going in the future. Well, that said, however, let's get into Comment Corner! It's time for Comment Corner, where I read your comments from the previous review. Of course, if you're new around here, you could probably guess that was going to be the case. With all that said, let us get into our comment from the previous video, which comes from Big X1, who says, the episode was good, but I wanted more to happen. Everyone just sat around waiting for takeout, and Glorio did nothing. This, of course, referring to the episode Glorio, where the great King Glorio did nothing. I'm saying King Glorio because I was going to make a joke about how his name kind of sounds like Cornholio from Beavis and Butthead. And whenever I hear his name, I'll just see it written, I just think, I am the great King Glorio, and I need TP from a bunghole. Which is a reference that most people aren't going to get. But, you know, the previous episode, like I say, I hope that when we look back on it, it will just be difficult second episode syndrome. There's always going to be one of those episodes, regardless of what series it is, where second episode of a season isn't going to be quite there, but, you know, it was decent for what it was. It had a flair and energy to it, but I just don't think that it really had enough for me. I will be honest, with the previous episode, I was struggling for stuff to talk about because it is just a bunch of people sitting around waiting for a takeaway. Here's the thing, do they deliver to Kami's Lookout? How are they getting it in? They're having to jump down. Well, I think actually established that Kibito was supposed to go to Capture Corp to get it, so mystery solved, I suppose. Anyway, let me know what you thought about this week's episode. Let me know in the comment section down below. Be sure to like the video as well. At some point in the not too distant future, I shall be hopefully doing a video speculating where Gohan is amongst all of this. Though knowing my luck, by the time I actually get round to doing it, it'll just end up being explicitly, oh, here he is, he's been doing this all this time. It's all the more reason why I should dedicate some time this week to doing it. Anyway, thank you all for listening, thank you all for watching, and see you next time. Goodbye! Thanks for watching. Be sure to like, favourite, subscribe, click the bell, and do all the YouTubey stuff that YouTube wants you to do. Go on, it'll do me a power of good. Until next time, my friends, goodbye!